Hello again, welcome back. And we're in our second video that is focused on Jainism. So we ended our last video completing a kind of overview of Jainism. And now we're going to end an introduction to the idea of the Jina and Tirthankara and some of the basic attributes of the Tirthankara figure, the Jina figure. But let us go now to the founder of what we understand to be Jainism in the form of a sculpture. So let me share my screen. Something is blocking my share button. There it is. Okay. I've yet to figure out how to do that gracefully, the share part. Okay, so here we are. We were looking at the Jain Tirthankara, probably Mahavira in meditation, first half of 11th century. Notice the term Svetambara, which is preceding, this title. Svetambara, which you may remember from your reading, which introduced you to Jainism in our last module, is one of two branches of Jainism that follow different practices. The Svetambara is a tradition where the practitioners wear white clothing, draped clothing, and at the very least a loincloth in the case of men, and allow for women to be Jain nuns. The other kind of Jain tradition is known, or type, is Digambara. And that they only permits men, and it is one of complete renunciation of clothing. And the difference between the two is that a discussion about the nature of enlightenment as Mahavira achieved it. So the Digambara, which I'll talk about at the end of this module, believe that Mahavira became very still and almost motionless to harm nothing, and only a sacred sound was emitted. And that sound is what guides and becomes the guide of the Jain faith, whereas the Svetambara believe that Mahavira actually moved around and taught, and that is the way that Jainism faith spread. So they're two different traditions. It's discussed in your reading. The visual form, though, of either is very similar, the only difference being, in the case of men, the inclusion of a loincloth here. So this figure is very, very simple. It reflects a renunciation of all material necessities other than a simple loincloth. The face is outwardly passive, so there's little to distract the beholder. The forms are very soft, the volumes flow one into another, and the emphasis is on simplicity and discipline, which is the Jain faith. Now remember, the long earlobes tell us this is a prince who became a renunciate and gave up his worldly possessions, which we'll look at in a narrative in a minute, in a manuscript. And let's go forward. You can see here that if you find yourself in an Asian art museum wondering if you're looking at Buddha or if you're looking at a Jain sculpture, one of the clues is this form right here. This is distinct to Jainism and the depiction of Tirthankara, which this is an auspicious symbol. It's a symbol of good fortune, good, not in the sense of monetary fortune, but good fortune in the direction of one's soul. At the base, you can see stylized lotus flowers, and that's often associated with sacred figures in all three faiths, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. And you can read about that in the handout on symbolism at the end of this module. And specifically, I have one on Jainist symbolism as well. So you can go back and look at this video again after having looked at that if you like. Okay. So for Jains, the meditation in a seated yogic posture was one of the predominant forms assumed by Jainas. So we can see the yogic posture here. But the secondary posture and a uniquely Jain form is the standing posture of body abandonment, which we call kayotskara or kayotsarga, where the mendicant, that is the person who's renounced all worldly possessions and a life of harmlessness, stands with the arms unsupported. So this is a different Tirthankara. It's Pafaradanta, which is a predecessor to Mahavira. But he's standing, and he is, once again, I hope you recognize now the Yakshi and the Yaksha here, the two attributes, and then probably two devotees here at the base who are seeking the radiance and the exemplary light of a model Jina that the devotee can aspire to become through discipline and practice. The Kayotsarga, the mendicant stands with arms unsupported, and this physically exacting pose is the most extreme expression of Jainism's central premise of ahimsa, that is, nonviolence, to all living creatures. To maintain complete immobility was to ensure no harm to any creature, however small. Now remember that the Jain principle, as stated in your reading, is that if you harm anything, you are essentially corrupting the possibility of your soul to achieve liberation through the karma of harm. So by acquiring bad karma of harming something, whether it's a plant that can, not all plants, but a plant such as an onion that has a root and a potential to form a new plant, you destroy that, you destroy life, you destroy a little insect, you cover your mouth with a cloth to avoid any creatures entering your mouth unknown, you walk barefoot to avoid crushing anything under your feet. All of this is designed to keep the body, the soul, pure of negative karma. And so to be perfectly still and harmless is an embodiment of the Jain principles of achieving freedom from samsara. Okay, so we're going to stop here and we'll go to our next video, which will be on Jain manuscripts. So I'll see you back here soon.